Hello, Netty lovers, and welcome to another episode of The Netty Life. Before we get into this episode, we'd like to thank Tribal Sport for all of their support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the Netty Life news. Hello, Netty lovers. This is a Com Games special episode, and we hope you've been enjoying the Netty Games so far. I'm Kate Cornish, and with me, as usual, is Brittany Carter. Britt, you lucky thing, you're halfway around the world soaking up all the netball action firsthand in Birmingham. So we're recording into very different time zones for this pod. And of course, I appreciate you getting up very early to pod with me. It certainly isn't your usual background. Where are you? Tell me all about your experience so far.
So I'm currently in Manchester, where my husband's family are from and based. Hence why you can see the background behind me is very English indeed.
There are curtains, Britt.
That's right. Yep, and some of the pictures behind me too as well. But some days I've been travelling down to Birmingham and some days I've been staying in Birmingham. So at the moment I'm in Manchester. But yeah, it's been wonderful so far. The crowd, I have to tell you, Kate, at the NEC Arena has been wonderful. They've been so engaged. And from the tweets I've been seeing online, I don't think that's been exactly coming through the broadcast. I think they might have perhaps pulled that microphone down that gives them all the atmos inside the arena, because it has been very loud and the fans have been really engaged. Dare I say it, I think they might be a better crowd than what we saw in Liverpool for the Netball World Cup in 2019. And with the weather, I mean, I came over here for an English summer and I've only just got my first 2 days of sun. So you'll be pleased to know that it's been quite cold and you haven't missed anything in that regard. Quite overcast and yeah, not much sun until now.
Oh, well, that sounds like a whole heap of fun, Britt. I'm really glad to hear actually that the crowd is as fantastic as you say, because I have to say that atmosphere isn't actually coming through the TV. So it's good to know that they're absolutely loving the netball. We have heard that the crowds have been massive and it's been very hard to get your hands on netball tickets. But yeah, maybe they could turn that atmosphere mic up just a little bit so we can all share in the experience that the viewers are having courtside. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we took my husband took his niece to the netball for the first time yesterday in that match against Wales for Australia, and we were able to get tickets the night before. So there are still tickets available to a lot of the games, but they're usually in the obscured view section.
Yeah.
And even for that first game Australia played against Barbados, he came for that session as well, and he was able to get a ticket on the day. So the capacity there has been well and truly within the 80 percentile, within the 90 percentile. So they're selling out most of the tickets for these games, but at the moment there have been a couple for sale. But I don't think you lose anything because the crowd, as I said, have been so loud. And I've put up a video yesterday of the crowd really singing along with the DJs that they've had, because I think that's been one of the great things in Birmingham is they've been sort of going around to all the different venues and having a look at some of the DJs that they've had, trying to keep the energy high between the matches. So even when the first match of the session, for example, yesterday it was Diamonds and Wales, finished up, they then had a DJ keeping everyone dancing and bopping along in their seats before the next game came. So yeah, the atmosphere has been incredible, and we can't put up videos really inside the venue just because of the Commonwealth Games rights and TV and digital rights around content. But I did share a video yesterday of them bopping along to the DJ. So have a look at that and you can see how packed this crowd is and how engaged they are, and that will give you a better idea.
Oh, I will. It sounds like a heap of fun, Britt. I seriously wish I was there with you. Never mind. Britt, last time we chatted, it was just before Com Games had started. We're now 4 games into the Diamonds campaign, and I wanted to ask you, have they been as good at this stage of the tournament as what you had hoped they would be?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm a hard marker. We're undefeated, so I have to be happy in that regard. And I think they have performed pretty well. I've been really pleased to see the depth in the team, and we've seen Stacey Marinkovich really facilitate that and try a lot of combinations and, bring on fresh legs to ensure that most players have got out on court in every game. But as the days go on, I'm starting to worry slightly about Paige Hadley's injury and how that will impact the team in bigger matches, because in my eyes, Liz Watson is starting to get a bit tired. And the question is whether Kate Maloney or Ash Brazel will provide the same punch through the court and that clinical feeding that we know Hadley has with such a low turnover rate. So that's something that I think is a worry as we head towards this game against Jamaica now, and as well as the semi-finals and potentially medal matches. But I'm also wondering, Kate, whether we've rotated too much now. It's amazing that Stacey Marinkovich has established that versatility, and it has been a talking point and a strength, I think, so far. But have we shown everyone all the aces we have up our sleeve too soon? Is there any surprise packets that we have left that the other teams haven't been able to study now? Because I think we may have shown our hand a little bit too early with some of these combinations. And we've also only seen some of them play a quarter here, half a game here. So players haven't essentially had to grind it out for longer than 2 quarters. And we know that the Super Netball timeouts could hit the Aussies and come back to bite them in those bigger games towards the end of the tournament. So I think we'll know more once we face Jamaica, but I do have some questions about that versatility and whether perhaps we've rotated the team a little bit too much.
Britt, we're going to talk about that versatility in the combos a little bit later on in the pod, but I do tend to agree with you, even in just the sense that Jamaica has a very strong starting 7, and fatigue may play a point later on in the comp for them, but that solid 7 is getting good court time together, and we aren't necessarily doing that with a particular 7 at the moment, but we'll get into that.
Yes, and we've rotated, as you mentioned, we're going to get into it with more depth, but we have rotated a lot of the positions except that wing attack spot. So Liz Watson has occupied the wing attack spot for a lot of the games. I know we saw Kira Austin in that position against Wales a bit more, and yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that, but I am worried about how tired she's getting in particular.
Britt, you mentioned Paige Hadley just then. You're sitting courtside, you're close to the action. Is there any more updates, or is everyone being very tight-lipped, as we know they have been over the last few days? What did you notice about Paige when you've seen her at court the last couple of days?
So yesterday in the match against Wales, she obviously didn't take the court, and she was sitting there on the bench, and she had a lot of strapping on her right calf. It's sort of hard to say. I'm not an expert, and I have to say that because, I don't know the extent of injuries and how long it takes someone to come back. But in my experience, when you injure a muscle, it can typically take a long time to heal. I'm thinking like a hamstring or whatever as well. So the fact that her calf is not good and hasn't been, 100% even coming into the games is a real worry. It's been interesting how cagey the Diamonds have been really about talking about that injury, because, I was having a chat with Jenny Sinclair on the side of the court about how much information they've been willing to give us. And she was saying, well, in the beginning, they didn't want to tell us whether it was a fresh injury or not, because then teams could target it. But I think in a way, that's a pretty old school way of thinking. Like, if you're up front with what's going on with her, there will be less sort of hoopla going on around it. So I agree in one sense, but in the other sense, I think they could have been a bit more transparent about when she sustained the injury and how she sustained it, because we didn't even know that it was in camp until a couple of days down the track, and they won't confirm whether it happened in Manchester or in Perth, which is, then raises all those questions that I wrote in the article about whether they should have had Maddie Proud as a reserve instead of Jamie Lee Price, and if she sustained the injury when Jamie Lee Price was still around, which I'm assuming she has because they said it was in camp. Did they weigh up with making that swap, and did they ultimately stick with Hadley because Jamie Price couldn't cover that wing attack position. Because she's essentially their third centre wing defence option that they had. They already had Maloney and they already had Ash Braz. So, yeah, I don't know if the right decisions have been made around that. Certainly Stacey Marinkovich, when I asked her that, was not happy. She didn't like that line of questioning. And she said, look, the injury was minor coming into this. We trust our medical staff. I think it's just really unfortunate that this has played out for Paige because it's her debut game. She's worked really hard to get here. And we know that she's probably one of the best centres we've got, so that she should be out on court as much as she can be. And unfortunately, at this moment, I personally can't see her making a return to the court. I know that others will not be happy with me saying that, but why would you test her against Jamaica? You wouldn't, considering she sat on the bench the whole time with her legs strapped up against Wales. You know, Jamaica are looking really deadly. I don't think you have room to bring on a centre or a wing attack in her form and with her injury, I mean, and just trial how she is. I don't think you have that room to move. And then we hit semi-finals and then we hit medal matches. So unless you're up by a few goals, I would be very reluctant to make that change and disrupt the lineup. So, yeah, I'm hoping for the best, but assuming the worst at this stage when it comes to Paige Hadley.
Yeah, I think we all are, unfortunately. All right, so moving along, we'll do a very quick recap on the games that Australia have played so far. Our first game of the tournament was Barbados, and while we love the flair and athleticism of this team, the Diamonds were just much too strong, winning 95-18. Now, interestingly, Jamaica have now also played Barbados, and they managed to score a whopping 103 goals in 60 minutes. So that just goes to show how capable this Jamaican team is. Scotland was up next for the Aussies in game 2. Scotland is, of course, being coached by our friend Tamsin Greenway and Sarah Francis Bayman. Both are former Roses and very experienced, and you can see that there's some very good stuff there for Scotland. I particularly like their goal attack, Bethan Goodwin. She did a lot of work in that game, and their goal defence, Emily Nicol, she was an absolute pest, which is exactly what we love to see from a goal defence. You can see the potential of players like Emma Barry, who plays goal shooter. She just needs some more confidence to be able to post up in the big moments and to learn how to use her height to her advantage and just get her hands a little bit stronger. She reminded me of a very young Seabass, Britt.
Oh, did she? Oh, yeah. I think there were some really good signs in that Scotland match, to be honest. I mean, they tested Australia in that first quarter in particular. And I thought, you know, we might have a bit of a match on our hands here. So I thought that in the early stages of that game, they actually played quite well. And when you look at the ages of their overall team, they're quite young and they're quite inexperienced. So I think the biggest point that Tamsin has been making throughout the game so far is that she just wants them to be able to test test teams for a period throughout a game. She's not expecting, big results against a team like Australia, for example, but she's expecting them to be able to disrupt the Diamonds, which is exactly what they did. So I would give that a tick. And if you're going to mention a player from that Scotland match, I would also be alluding to Emily Nicol, who I think was excellent from there. And she only finished with 2 gains for Scotland, but I thought she tested Kira Austin in a tough contest and played more of that tagging role rather than challenging for the ball. And she delayed Kira from driving into the circle on a number of occasions and held her away from the play, which ultimately made it difficult for the shooters to link up and led to more work for Gretel Bueta. So I thought Emily Nicol did an excellent job in this match. And it actually sort of highlighted for me the fact that Gretel Bueta is perhaps doing too much again in some of these Diamonds matches, as we saw her do for the Queensland Fibers throughout their 2022 season. We know that she's one of the biggest stars of this team, but she doesn't need to be taking every second pass and she doesn't need to be setting everything up. So I think that there's danger in relying too much on Gretel and giving her too much to do. And I think that it's really important that the Diamonds stick to what they know about their roles and make sure that everybody is utilised, because in a lot of that play against Scotland, it was quite telegraphed that Australia was putting all their traffic through her. I mean, Austin barely put some shots up. So it was all about feeding Bowetta. And I think Scotland started to pick ball up, especially in the back end of that first quarter, because they noticed that and they were able to target Gretel, and then they knew the feed was only coming to her and not Austin. So I think that we have to be careful we don't rely on her too much, and that Gretel also doesn't do too much when it comes to setting up that attacking play.
Thanks for that, Britt. Our third game of the tournament was against South Africa, and we thought this was going to be the one that tested us the most out of our first 3 games. The Proteas did put up a fight, but were outgunned by the Aussies all over court. They did have a solid third quarter, only losing by 3 goals, but as often happens with this team, they're just unable to stay in the fight for a full 60 minutes. They are in a transition period with some big names who have recently retired from international netball. And of course, they're also without Lenise Potgieter and Carla Pretorius, who would have been a massive help to them, not just in this game, but for the whole tournament. Their captain, Bongi Masomi, has over 130 caps to her name. And I thought she did a really good job giving Ash Braz a run for her money the other night. She had her for speed, and Ash was certainly not having it all her own way. Ina Marie Venter, a goal shooter, had some good patches of netball, but she still isn't as consistent as what we all know she can be. We did meet goal attack Elmarie Vandenberg, who was fearless in her game. And I think, Britt, that this might be a name that we hear a little bit more of in the coming years. Now, we did win that game 74-49. It was comfortable, but it wasn't the prettiest of wins.
Yeah, I agree with you in that. I think there were some mistakes that crept into this match for the Diamonds, but I think we did see our strongest starting lineup take the court, which in my eyes just sort of cemented the fact that they are the best starting 7. It was the same 7 that won the 2022 January Quad Series final. And I think they, as I said, cemented that those starting positions should we come up against Jamaica soon, as well as the semi-finals. And that combination between Bowetta and Wood was the best I think I've seen it so far. They were a little bit shaky in that opening quarter to start against Barbados. And I think that the ball movement, particularly in that first quarter with Paige involved, was the slickest I've seen it. And Australia did struggle to push forward at points. And Pumsa Mawene gave Gretel something to think about when she took an intercept from behind. That's really impressive and so hard to do. But yeah, I think that the really slick ball movement was something that I took away from that South African match. And I also noticed that Courtney Bruce was being watched a lot more. She was pulled up for 17 penalties, which is the most that she's been pulled up so far these games, but she was also on court a little bit longer. So you've got to take that with a grain of salt. But that also could have been a product of the fact that South Africa are a higher ranked team, and they were a bit more physical than we've seen some of the other teams so far play against Australia. But the biggest story for me, of course, was Paige, and it was hard to think about anything else once she was forced to come off the court, because I just kept watching Liz Watson and thinking she looks really tired and starting to get a bit buggered, and we're losing a lot of mid-court rotation without her. So that was the biggest worry I had coming out of that match, not the way the Diamonds play, but perhaps just that Paige Hadley injury, which we've already talked a little bit about. Yeah, and I think I need to give a shout out to Bongi as well, because she just is so consistent, and she really, I think, deserves a Super Netball contract. I mean, I know she had one with the Adelaide Thunderbirds to start the Super Netball competition when that was first established in 2017, but I don't think she got a very fair go at the Thunderbirds, and we know that, you know, their first 2 years under Dan Ryan didn't go to plan. So I actually think Bongi has something to offer Australian netball as well. And, you know, as soon as you see South Africa is the opposition that Australia is going to be facing, you know that she's going to be a consistent driver inside that midcourt. So, yeah, I loved watching her in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the matchup that stood out for me, her battle with Ash Brazel. And geez, Ash was getting so incredibly frustrated because the speed, she was just being beaten for speed all over court. And, you know, I think for me, the problem, it's not a problem. It's just that when she was with the Thunderbirds, I don't really think she was coached properly. I don't think they know what to do with someone like her, because she's very different to how Aussie netballers play wing attack. And I think that was probably part of why we didn't see her get a lot of court time. And it's really to their own detriment that they didn't work harder to try and get her as a solid lineup in that team, because she brings so much. And, a point of difference with athleticism and how other people play a position is only going to be of benefit to you if you can cement them and those combinations in a starting 7 team. So yeah, I'd love to see her back here. I don't know whether that would ever happen, but yeah, she would be someone who I would love to see get another run in Super Netball. I think she'd be fantastic. So game 4, that was Wales. It was a most recent game, and the Aussies won that game with relative ease. The first quarter and the final quarter was a really good tussle to watch between the two teams, but, the Diamonds, again, just better all over court. Even though at times I think they did look a bit clunky. It was really fantastic to see Wales come out with great intensity, and they have the hallmarks of what could be a really good international side. I felt like they played a very similar style of game to Australia, but the finesse and the fitness was not quite there. In this game, we saw, again, a mountain of changes by Stacey Marinkovich, and to the delight of netball Twitter, Kira Austin spent 3 quarters in wing attack, which gave a tired Lizzie Watson a break. We did hold our breath when Steph Wood tweaked her ankle and went off, but Britt, I know you spoke to her after the game and she said it was just a burner, so fingers crossed that's still all it is. And then Sarah Clow took a fall. She stayed on for the rest of the game, so we're assuming there was no damage done there. Britt, we won this game 79-33. What did we learn about the Diamonds in this game? It definitely wasn't their silkiest performance, but they got the job done.
Yeah, it was a really physical game and a lot of bodies hit the deck. And I did think Australia played with a bit more freedom in this match. There was a lot of loose play and not all of it came off. I don't think the ball movement was as clinical or as slick as we saw it to start against South Africa. And there were moments where Australia would win possession, then lose it, and then win it back in the same play in a period of a minute or so. So we just weren't as clinical with our passing. And actually, that's something that I've noticed in every match except for that game to start against South Africa, that the passing has been a little bit off. I don't think it's been as structured as it perhaps could be. And perhaps that's because we've got some players with flair like Ugrota Baweta occupying that attacking front of the third. And then we also saw Ash Braz get a start in centre for this match, which I was pretty pleased about because I think she's been really playing very well there. But I think when you've got a Braz at centre and then a Ugrota Baweta at goal attack, that sometimes the flair from both of them can sometimes lean towards the too much side of the scale. And it's not just those two players that then got caught up in the loose style of play. It's the others that sort of get the bug and think, oh, is this what we're doing now? And then we were trying to pull off some of this crazy style of play and just all these really long swinging passes when sometimes just working it with short, sharp passes towards circle edge would have got the job done. I think the start that Stacey Marinkovich gave to Cara Conan was well deserved for this game. It was her first start and goal shooter at the Games and her first time playing the full 60 minutes. And I honestly think she's been one of our best players so far. She shot close to 50 goals in this match, and I really like that combination with her and Ugrota Baweta. We discovered that it was actually an old combination from their A&L days playing for Queensland, and that Steph Wood was in that team too. So it's really nice that those three players have gone full circle and are now representing Australia. And just, that combination between Baweta and Conan is so lovely. They link up so nicely and nothing feels forced. The ball just flows freely down to that end, and you don't really have to worry about the communication because they seem to have a pretty good understanding of each other. So that's something I've noticed. And you mentioned something right before you asked me the question there, Kate, that it wasn't the silkiest of performance for the Diamonds, but they got the job done. And I actually think even though the scores have been quite a big blowout and Australia has won them dominantly in all 4 games so far, that yes, we have got the job done, but I don't think we have been as clinical as we could have been throughout every 60 minutes, throughout every game. And perhaps, again, I'm being a very harsh marker there, but I think the real test is to come against Jamaica. And once we see how we play against them, I think we'll better have a better idea. It's just really hard to judge. But if we're making these mistakes against lower ranked teams, it does give me a little bit of a worry in the back of my mind. How will we perform against an English Roses or a Silver Ferns, because we just can't afford to. For example, Bueta missed 4 shots at goal to start that match against Barbados in the first quarter. And yes, it was the first quarter of the games. Yes, there were some cobwebs to be blown out and there were some nerves to settle, but you cannot afford to miss 4 goals against a New Zealand, for example, or an England Roses, or even a Jamaica, as we're about to face. So that is what gives me a slight worry in the back of my mind, but I am probably just being a hard marker there. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on how Kira Austin has performed in wing attack, Kate, because I know that you're really always watching that mid-court space like a hawk. And I think that Kira's movement has been great. We know that she slinks around court really nicely to open up space, but for me, the feeding probably hasn't been as pinpoint as I would like it. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on Kira Austin in wing attack?
I agree. Some of the feeds were a bit off last night. She had 45 minutes, I'm pretty sure, in wing attack. But overall, I love it. What I love about what Kira brings to wing attack is the incredible fast release. So even though some of those didn't go to plan last night, you could see what she was trying to do. So if there was an opportunity for her to really cement a spot at wing attack, the combinations between her and whichever shooters are on court would grow, and you wouldn't see as many errors come from her as she gets to play with them more often. But she's on the money with the pass that she's trying to throw. It's just that the combination and understanding between her and the shooters are not quite there yet. But for her to be able to step on court and perform the way that she has at Com Games level at wing attack, when we know she is brilliant as a goal attack, really just speaks to how good she is as a netballer. One of those, Netty brain sort of players that we talk about who can swing between 2 positions. And for me, it's the fast release and also the knowledge of being a goal attack who's now standing on the edge of the circle, who knows when that ball should be going in. She picks the exact moment that the defender's eyes are down, and it's bloody hard to do. But I think her strength there is that because she is a goal attack most of the time that she's on court, she has just a very unique understanding of what a feeder wants. So I have very much enjoyed her there, but I agree. You almost don't want to curb her fast release of the ball because that's what is so good. But you're right. It's in some of those moments where her errors were coming, but that is just about building a combination with the 2 shooters that are in there. So all in all, to come on court and do what she's done in wing attack has been very nice. And the other thing I like about her there is that she doesn't play it the same way that the other wing attacks in our team would approach that position. We've got a lot of speedy, punch through the middle for, Paige and Lizzie. Kira is very controlled about her movements. She's very obvious, got great timing, and just plays it so very differently. So I think if she did get a little bit more time on court in wing attack, if Paige isn't to join us again or just have very heavily monitored minutes on court, like if her load is managed, the combinations will start to form with Kira. She's a very smart netballer, so she'll figure it out. I think last night there was a bit of like you were saying, there was a bit too much flair every now and then. And what Stacey will have asked is rein it in. That discipline must be there. So I don't think you'll have to tell Kira Austin that twice for her to pick up on that.
It was almost like a knock-on effect. As I said, they sort of all got the bug and thought, oh, is this what we're doing now? Let's have some fun here. And just knowing that you're coming up against Wales, you probably think, oh, we've got a bit more freedom to move here. However, if you get into that line of thought and then you face Jamaica next, that could be a little bit troubling. And, some of these players, you've got to take the good with the bad, obviously. With a Grota Bueta, that some of her flair sometimes isn't always going to come off, but at her absolute best, she is fantastic. So you sort of weigh up the good and the bad there, don't you? So Stacey Marinkovich may just need to weigh up whether some of these mistakes that were made are worth, potentially putting out on court and just going with it and just seeing if we can, because we know we can win the ball back. The defense has been really solid. I think that's the biggest thing for me is that a number of combinations have really impressed. I think Courtney Bruce has been fantastic at goalkeeper. Really love Sunday Ariang at the front of her, as have I with Jo Weston. And again, Sarah Clow, Sunday Ariang have been a wonderful combination too. So I think we've got lots of nice options there. But yeah, plenty to think about. And I know we're going to go into those combinations now. So let's get to that.
That was a lovely segue. Thank you. Yes. This is the part of the pod where we're going to be able to discuss our opinions and talk about how we think the Aussie Diamonds have been performing in a little bit more detail. So let's get into that. We're going to discuss Jamaica in some depth a little bit later. But before we do, let's have a chat about some combinations that we've already quickly mentioned and standout personal performances that we've seen over the last 4 matches. I did have Conan and Bewetta down, but you gave me such beautiful insight just before that I'm not going to ask you about them again. I would like to ask you about Sarah Clow and Sunday Ariang as a goalkeeper goal defense combination. We haven't seen much of it, but it is pretty. I think it speaks to the quality of player that Sunday Ariang is, that it hasn't mattered who has been her goalkeeper behind her. She's had a magnificent debut to Com Games. And even though this isn't a combination that fans have seen before, it looked very, very professional. Britt, do you think that even if this is not a starting lineup, there might be enough in this combination to put on court to mix things up in defence if we're being beaten at the back?
100%. And, it's interesting. I went and had a look back at the quad series combinations we ran with, and we actually saw Clow and Ariang come together a little bit in one of the games there. But I think it was so fleeting and there was nothing really to write home about that it didn't really cement in my mind until I was looking at it here at Com Games and thinking, wow, have we ever seen this before? Because for me, it was a totally brand new combination. So I think perhaps the fact that it's been able to build throughout the quad series, behind in the background, potentially during their training stages, and then it's obviously been used a fair bit in their training in Perth and Manchester in the lead up to these games, has allowed it to blossom. And the word I've been using to describe Sunday Ariang so far at these games is a chameleon, because she just molds so nicely to whoever she's paired with. I think she's done a wonderful job in goal defence. She's also really impressed in wing defence. And it's really hard to leave her off the court, because I know that she's young. I know that she's less experienced than some of the other defenders we have in our lineup, but she's just so elusive and, a bit of a surprise packet for a lot of the other teams that haven't faced her before. And the fact that she's just so clean means that you're not losing, any time when she's like you are with perhaps a Bruce, that gets pulled a little bit more. So I would expect Sunday Ariang to still be making it onto the court for these next 3 games to come, because I do think that, she has a lot to offer the Australian Diamonds. And I don't think Sarah Clow has been at her absolute best in these games. Whatever it is, I think she came up with a fair bit of ball to finish the match against Wales yesterday. I think she finished with something like 11 gains. But I did think that, watching the start of the match in particular, that it took her some time to work into the match. And she didn't really have a lot of answers, for some of the shooters I've seen her come up against. It's sort of taken her a real amount of time to work out what the best thing to do is to try and get in front of them and get that ball. So I think Clow, when she's been with Sunday Ariang, has particularly worked really nicely. And I know we speak a lot about the keepers performing when they have a goal defence in front of them that complements them. Now we know that Ariang complements Bruce at the West Coast Fever, and now we know that she also complements Sarah Clow really nicely. So I'm absolutely loving that combination. And I think that Sarah Clow actually lifts when Sunday Ariang is out front of her.
I agree, 100%. Now, Paige Hadley, we have spent a bit of time talking about her, but while we don't want to assume the worst, and our hearts break even just considering the fact that she may not get on court again, if she is unable to take any further part in this series, how much of a loss is that for the squad? And what do you see the ramifications being as a flow-on effect? Because it will mean players like Lizzie Watson and Kate Maloney are being used for every game, and fatigue really could be a factor for the Diamonds. Is that something you'd agree with?
I know that Lizzie Watson got a start in this match against Wales yesterday, and then she came off and had the rest of the three quarters to sit on the bench and rest while Kira Austin occupied that wing attack position. But I think I would have just rested her the entire game. Like, at this point, you really just need her to be 100% fresh to go for these bigger matches. And even in the match against South Africa where Hadley went down, Stacey left Watson in wing attack to finish the match. It just... For me, I would be ensuring that she has longer to rest. And when I asked Stacey about it, she said, she trains really hard. When you see her train day to day, she's actually training a lot harder than you see her out on court. But yeah, that may be the case, but that doesn't always mean that she's not going to be tired by the time we get 5 games in, So I don't know. I think that loss of Hadley will more so be in the fact that she's just so good driving onto that circle edge, and we know that she brings a lot to that centre position. She combined really nice with Watson at the Quad Games. I just think that you lose that clinical head when Hadley isn't an option, let's say. So you're also going to lose that rotation, which is what you've alluded to with Kate Maloney and also Liz Watson potentially getting tired. And it's just really sad, I think, given that we know that Paige Hadley has done a lot to get here for these games. And it was really excited about playing them, and to get a bit of an injury that's meant that her games debut so far has been quite disjointed is just really devastating in that regard. So I think it will impact Australia when we get to those later stages, perhaps, because we just won't have any room to move inside that midcourt. Yeah, and I know that we've got Akira Austin that can start in wing attack. I know Steph Wood can also feature there, but something that I'm curious about, Kate, is that we haven't seen Kate Maloney get a start in wing attack. And I know she was picked based on her ability to occupy the centre and wing defence positions, but I've seen her play wing attack lots for Vixens in the past. So why haven't we seen Stacey try that obvious option to me with Maloney in wing attack? That's a curious question for me.
It's actually a fantastic question. I thought it myself, and it's interesting that I suppose when you look how players' careers progress, Kate has turned out to be more of a defensive sort of centre, I suppose, than an attacking sort of centre. So in Stacey's mind, she's thinking, I've got players like Kira Austin or Steph Wood who have that really creative netball brain in the attacking end. So I can only imagine that that's why she's put Kira Austin in that wing attack position. Because Kate Maloney traditionally, or now over her career, I feel like has become more of a defensive sort of player, and that's where you get most money for your buck with her. So that's the only thing I can think, because I thought it was interesting as well that that she hasn't been put in wing attack yet, considering there is a hole there to fill.
And we've tried almost every other combination we have. Why I don't understand the thinking behind, trying a completely fresh combination with Kira Austin in wing attack and Liz Watson in centre, for example, when you've got a player like Kira Austin, who you've already alluded to, is playing wing attack quite well, but has never really played wing attack until here at this point. She's played it a little bit for the Giants when she started with them, but coming up through the pathways, Kira Austin was not a wing attack. So it's not like she's tapping back into some, something from her previous playing days before she hit this top level of the sport. And when you watch the Vixens, sometimes when they need something different in the midcourt, they'll switch Watson into centre and Maloney into wing attack. And I don't think, all things aside about her being more of a defensive centre, I don't think Simone McInnes would be using her on wing attack if she didn't think she could play wing attack. So I'm just curious that why we haven't seen that play out yet, rather than trying to forge a totally new combination between Austin and Watson, for example. And I know that, I've just spoken about how we need to rest Lizzie Watson, and perhaps putting her in centre is not resting her. But if we've tried every other combination so far, why haven't we seen that combination? That's been something that's been on my mind.
That's a good question, and you should ask Stacey that next time you speak to her, Britt, and report back. That's what you should do.
Will do. I will do.
Okay, well, that's it from us. Once again, we'd like to thank Tribal Sport for their support of the Netty Life. For everyone at home, make sure you check your local guides for the times on Thursday when the Big Four meet for the first time in this tournament. We're going to get our first look at who truly has the squad to win this Games. It's Australia versus Jamaica and England versus New Zealand. They are two games that you will not want to miss. We'll be back in a few days' time to talk about those matches as we head into the business end of the Games. Until then, it's bye for now.
Bye.
A huge thanks again to Tribal Sport for supporting this pod. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the Netty Life news.